Hey, everybody, it's Drew Scooter. This is Question Corner. If you want to participate in Question Corner, the best place to put the questions are on our Patreon page. This will be a free post, so you can post whether you support the show on Patreon or not. You could also put it in the comments of wherever you're seeing this video, or if you're a patron on Discord. Those are the two places that just places I check that where the messages come straight to me is those two places. But yeah, I'll try to answer questions as I see them. And this question comes from Christiana, though I don't have it in front of me. Let me look it up. I tried to answer this. I don't know how many videos I've made at this point. I think 2 videos, maybe 3 that I've just deleted because I don't know. I haven't been able to give a concise answer that I felt good about. Let me see what the question is, though. No wonder these videos, no wonder it takes so long for me to do this. But it basically comes down to like, what tips would you give somebody that wants to give become a working artist? And actually I had the answer to thought of it earlier today, and now of course it's escaped me. And like, how's podcasting changed and stuff like that. Oh, it's been almost 10 years since the start of the show. And what's the best takeaway from the past decade of podcasting? And what's the most poignant, teachable moment that you could pass on to other creatives, not necessarily in podcasting? The most poignant, teachable moments, I think, are multiple. So I'll answer 2 first, but it kind of segues into one. Is like I give you my top ones, and maybe I'll elaborate. Like, one thing is like realize that by doing a hobby, like, and trying something out or trying to create stuff, and if you're able to find a way to do that consistently, even in small chunks of 10 or 15 minutes a day consistently, what I found in my experience is that's incredibly more powerful than trying to carve out a lot of time one time a week. So that's one thing, is like, just do it consistently. And if you don't believe me, do it for whatever you're interested in for 10 minutes a week for 6 months or a month, and then compare it to the other output. Then do it for 2 months and compare it to your other outputs. Just give yourself a chance to carve out that time, even if it's 5 days a week. I find I ideally do it 7 days a week. The writing for the podcast being the most essential creative building block for the show. That's one thing. For me, deadlines have worked magically. And that's what is the difference between going into another tip of like other stuff I've done and Sleep With Me, is that somehow, more or less by accident, I decided, okay, I'm just going to start releasing Sleep With Me. And that kind of gave me deadlines, like public facing deadlines. So 1, it got rid of my perfectionism. 2, it kind of gave me, it just made it a little bit easier to do the work, being like, okay, I have to get this done by this point, and then I'm going to release it. And that's not the same with all forms of art, but trying to find a deadline that you're accountable for, it is magic for me. Like, if I don't have deadlines, other projects I've wanted to do, even with doing Sleep With Me for a long time and learning that works, has been really difficult. And then another thing I've learned is that Sleep With Me wasn't the first thing I tried. So sometimes you got to do the things before you do the thing that you're going to keep doing. Like, I tried out short form and long form types of writing, not novel writing, but like writing screenplays and skits and stuff like that. And I even did that somewhat consistently. But none of that, at some point I was like, okay, this isn't working. And I was even doing the screenplay, the longer I was working on this one screenplay and rewriting it. And even then I got to a point where I'm like, okay, well, I have a full-time job. I'm rewriting the screenplay and I'm producing this podcast. Something's got to give. And it was like, okay, let me just focus on this podcast. And it was very similar with my career, where I was like, okay, in order to progress in my career, I have to get my master's. And that was a big turning point for me. I wasn't like I was going to leave my job at that point. I've been doing the show for a little while. I was like, no, I think I'm going to I can't get my master's and do this podcast. Let me try to do this podcast. But it's also creating another thing that works with Sleep With Me early on, and that hasn't worked since then, that I should return to, is also having points where you could, I call them quit points, but you could call them evaluation points or refocusing points or whatever it is, where you have a meeting with the stakeholders. I was making the show by myself and I was single, so I wasn't in any kind of partnership. So it's like I was the only stakeholder at with the show. So it was like, okay, my goals were, let me make one episode. Let me make two and release 2 episodes. Let me release and make 8 episodes. Let me make and release 21 episodes. Let me make and release 50 episodes. And those were my first goals. And after each one of those, I said, should I still keep doing this? Like, it's really hard. Like, I work and then I work on the podcast. And each time though, it's like, yeah, I keep making it, but it also helped me adjust my expectations. And when I stopped doing that, I went from 50 to, I think, trying to do it for 1 year. And I had the of just trying to do the podcast. I can't remember at first it was 2 years or 3 years, but as I stopped having those short-term goals that were under my control, like financial stuff with the podcast and listener numbers and external responses aren't under my control. Sometimes I feel like they should be, or I put the pressure on myself that they should be, but they aren't. But hitting a certain deadline or a certain number of episodes, those are under my control. And they're not even taste-based. It's like, oh, I don't even have to say, was the episode good or not? It's like, oh, I did make 25 episodes. Oh, I did make this many. So having a goal that's under your control and that's kind of neutral, like making a certain number of episodes is, at least for me, is emotionally neutral. That was powerful. And then be like, okay, do I still want to keep doing this? Can I still do this? And those have been turning points for the podcast where I have had those decision points. Like when I left my job, I had to make all these budgets for the show, including a lot of time budgets. And I didn't leave my job slowly. That's a whole nother story. But it was like, okay, there's no way the show getting released 3 times a week is never brought in. It was like, this just isn't sustainable. And it was only because I paused and I was like, hey, like, does this keep making sense? Like, even if I was getting paid for a part of the work I was doing, like if I had to pay somebody else to do that work, like there'd never be the budget for 3 episodes a week. So then we cut back to 2 episodes a week, and that enabled me to keep making the show. So those are my main tips. The other one, and I think this go for podcasting or creative things. And the next one kind of goes into where podcasting is at right now. It does apply to other careers or other forms of art, but maybe not all of them. Is like, if your goal is you've been doing something for a little while, like it took me a couple of years. Of course, in the back of my mind, I was like, man, I would love to just do this as a job. And that had a lot of unrealistic expectations with it. But there was part of me that's like, could I do this, make this podcast a job? And I slowly transitioned from a full-time job, making the podcast with a full-time job for years, then cutting back my work hours slowly over a year or 2 period to where I was doing the podcast full-time. But I think as you get into that place of like, can I transition from my job to doing this as a part-time job or another job, is remember, like, I guess right now I only see it as like a twofold path. Is like, if you're going to do some sort of creative thing like podcasting and it's starting to bring in income, and then it looks like it could bring in income that could replace your income you're getting from your day job. And you have an emergency fund and all those kind of things. Do you want to do this as a work for hire, or do you want to do this and be like run a small business basically? No one ever kind of, if people explained it to me, I didn't like clearly understand that, because you like if you decide to do it as a small business, the reality is the hours you're at work, you're going to do running the small business like 40 hours a week. And then you'll be doing the creative stuff. So your time really won't change. But maybe knowing that and knowing it now, it's kind of a little bit more freedom. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, like I spend a large portion of my week running a business that the output is creative, and that then I also try to, so it's like, but that is only one path. And in podcasting, we've kind of seen the pros and cons of like doing work for hire, which means that you're working for a business producing something. And those type of relationships can look like a lot of different things, like whether you own the thing you're producing or do they own it, and it's fully work for, I mean, I guess that's what work for hire is, but it's kind of like, or are you producing something? And when you're doing, there's a lot of pros and cons. Right now, podcasting is really contracting, and there's tons of layoffs. And a lot of those people who experience those layoffs or not renewals is like, that's one of the perils of doing the work for hire. But the thing for the work for hire is, like, a few years ago, even to me, it was like, maybe I should look at that, because at least initially it offers like something that's like, oh, well, this will be more, then you don't have to run the biz. Like, you could just do the creative output. And this is, you get a little bit at the time security and predictability of your income and stuff like that. But at the same time, then you're work for hire. So then it's like, okay, if we're doing cutbacks, we could lay you off or renegotiate. But just kind of getting an idea of your personality of like, hey, am I the kind of person, do I think I want to run a business, or do I think I want to do this? And I guess, like with all creative stuff and podcasting, even though it's 10 years after the start of the show, I think there's still ideas like out there that are unexplored, and styles that are unexplored, and genres and stuff where, like, it comes down to like a balance of your ego. Like, your voice is important. And if you have ideas and a way of expressing yourself that's important, it does take something to go from that to like having people that like enough people that are like whatever fans or consuming your content, or however you want to put it, to like be able to support yourself. But it's like, it doesn't change the fact that there's a lot of opportunities to express yourself in a unique way in podcasting. And I guess podcasting is still decentralized as opposed to some other forms. So there still is like the ability to make a show and distribute a show without a lot of the downside of decentralized stuff, as opposed to like making stuff and putting it on YouTube, is that YouTube is like a little bit more, it's centralized. So it's like, oh, if you hit a certain number on YouTube, and then you can start to monetize on YouTube. But then you're kind of very similar to the work for hire thing. It's like, you're running your own business, but you're running your own business on YouTube, where podcasting, the ways of making money are a little bit less predictable. But that also means there's less people like, I don't know, there's more opportunity to explore stuff, but maybe not to, I don't know, there's something else in there. But yeah, I think it's important to try. I think that's the main thing I've learned is like, it's important to try in a consistent way. That's really hard. I mean, it was really hard for me, and it's important to kind of just see where things go, but then consistently do the work. And I'm lucky that, and people say, what do you mean lucky? Like, I tried in a lot of things like that didn't work out. I started the podcast because something else really blew up and failed. I happened to get sober unrelated to the podcast right after the podcast. So that meant I was more like, I was able to like I didn't have, my life had changed in a way where there was just, the doors were open just enough at the right time for me to do this. And, so it's like, but at the same time, it's like, if you're doing the work consistently, even for 10 or 15 minutes a day, like then you can slip through those doors a little bit easier. And I don't know, I just see that a lot. And I saw it a lot of myself of like, one day I'm going to do this, or one day I'll have the time. And one day, and I still do it with other projects. It's like, well, one day, like I'll get the work mix right on the podcast, and I can, like, I'll start another project, or one day this, or this. And, it's like, no, it's like that 10 or 15 minutes a day initially creates the foundation, that then you're ready when that one day comes, or you're already producing stuff and then you're developing it from there. So I think, I don't know, I think that's it. Everybody else, like, those are the teachable moments. And I hope this is helpful, and you can ask more questions, or anybody can ask more questions. And I appreciate it. Thank you so much.